In the name of God, who calls us beloved despite our imperfection, and who is always calling us home. Amen. So I received a letter this week. It came out of the blue, addressed to me at the cathedral. It was in the box outside of my office when I arrived on Wednesday, and I almost didn't stop to pick it up. I saw it there in my box, but I was really busy on Wednesday, rushing about, getting things ready for our service. And I thought, well, let me just leave it there till next week. My mind was very full on Wednesday and all through this week with lots of doubts and fears. I was worried about our live streaming system. Would it work? I was worried about my sermon for Ash Wednesday. Was it good enough? Would it really help people who'd been living in a wilderness for a year, a wilderness of pandemic? Would it help them to have hope in God? Did I make the right decision to send ashes to people in the mail? Would they experience it as a gift or as a burden, as they were imposing them on themselves? I was tired from a year of making decisions about things that I didn't feel exactly equipped to address. Decisions about safety protocols and what to do if an employee tested positive for COVID, decisions about whether to travel with my family, decisions about how often to call people to check in on them and make sure that they were okay, and how to assess whether people I only see on Zoom are doing all right. I was tired and doubting myself and feeling like there was just no amount of pastoral care that I could offer others, or no amount of self-care I could offer to myself that would really be adequate to the situation at hand. So I was rushing around the office and holding all of that, and also holding in my heart my own children's nervousness about their young adult lives and their friendships, and wondering whether there was more that I could do or should do to reassure them and calm them and encourage them. And I was mourning all the things that I had imagined that we would do together in this, their 18th year, things that just can't happen this year. So I just kept walking past this letter, my mind and heart full of all these doubts and self-doubts and the too muchness of it all. But then I grabbed the letter on my way out the door and I kind of shoved it in my purse and took it home, and it stayed in my purse for a couple days after I got home. And when I finally cleaned out my purse, I took a look at the envelope. Ran Hamner. It was from Ran Hamner. And suddenly, seeing that name, a whole chapter of my life came back into my mind and heart. I was a brand new priest serving in a church outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Ran and his wife, Julie, were pillars of the church. And the two of them were the most warm, kind, welcoming people that I'd ever met. They were in their mid-50s at that time, about the age that I am now. And about a year after I arrived, they got some bad news. Julie had cancer, a form that was famously tough. Throughout the following 18 months, the whole parish prayed and supported and cheered when the treatment yielded good news, and cried when the test results were not good. And just traveled alongside this family as best we could. When Julie's time on this earth ended, it was my task to preside at the funeral and to stand at the graveside. The funeral was hard, but beautiful. And the whole place was filled with daisies, her favorite flower. They were hard to find in February when she passed, but we made it happen. This being Wisconsin, it's hard to put ashes in the ground in the winter, so we waited until May to gather in the memorial garden for the committal. It was raining, and drops fell on the page in my brand new prayer book that I had just gotten with my name engraved on the front. I didn't care. I wanted my prayer book to carry the scars of that loss, for the belovedness of Julie to travel with me through my whole journey as a priest. Within 6 months after that committal, my tenure at that church ended, and I was moving to Boston for a new call. I lost track of Ran as life kept moving forward, and I was called to be present where I was and present to my children when they were born. And through the years, I thought about trying to find him just to check in. I hoped he was okay, maybe even more than okay. I thought of him every time I opened my prayer book to that wrinkly page, which is still in my prayer book and still there every time I open it. But I wondered whether he would even remember me, or whether contacting him might open a wound of a time of loss that he really wouldn't want opened. But this week, 20 years after Julie's passing, at a time when the challenges of this past year were throwing me so off balance and making me doubt so much about myself, Ran sent me a letter. He told me about his life, and he updated me on his children. He's doing really well. He's finding joy, thanks be to God. His kids are doing really well. And then he thanked me for the ministry that I had offered 20 years ago. And he quoted the sermon that I gave at Julie's funeral. Evidently, 20 years ago, I said this: if you would honor the life of Julie Hamner, do it in this way. Look for the face of Christ in others and let them know how beautiful and holy they are. By sending me this letter, Ran was doing exactly that for me. He was reminding me of my belovedness at a moment when I really needed a reminder. This is where Lent begins, this year and all years for all of us. You are my beloved, God says to Jesus and to us. You are enough. You are exactly the incarnation of divine beauty and love that you are called to be. I needed to be reminded of that this week, and I bet you do too. I bet that being out in the wilderness this last year of pandemic has left you doubting it. And I bet that the injustices and the warped systems and corporate messages of this world have thrown you for a loop and disconnected you from the deep, holy, scripturally solid, great truth that you are beloved. So let me remind you who you are. You are beautiful and holy. I see the face of Christ in you, even through this Zoom screen. Jesus was not on Zoom when he heard this message from God, but his location has more in common with ours than we may think. Notice where he is in today's gospel. He's not in the halls of power. He's not in the big, rich city. He's not with the fancy people wearing fancy robes. He's not standing by an ornately carved baptismal font wearing a linen robe laced with beautiful etchings that has been passed down through the generations. He's way out on the edge of the region, on the banks of a muddy river, standing with people who have come out to be baptized by John because the way of the world is not working for them. And they know that the system is broken, that the hierarchies and divisions that they're living with are a burden. They are suffering, and they are judged. They've been judged unlovable, unfixable, beyond the pale. Jesus is always with the brokenhearted, always with those who don't feel very beloved. That's where he's baptized, and that's where he will spend almost all of his ministry. To prepare him for that, the Spirit hurls him into the wilderness. The Greek literally says hurl. Our translation says throws, but it's hurl. The Spirit hurls him into the wilderness where he's tempted for 40 days, just as the Hebrew people were tempted for 40 years, tempted to doubt his belovedness, to doubt the call that loving others is worth it, to doubt that love is enough. But he doesn't turn back. He returns to the journey, having been tested by Satan, returns to the journey of suffering with us, suffering for us, and showing us over and over again that we are beloved. Lent begins here. Today, and all through this holy season, we will be taking time after worship to deepen our call to become beloved community by addressing racism within us and around us. We will be looking at the gospel through an anti-racist lens. And those of you who are with us at home should have received a guide for this process that looks sort of like this. I hope that you spent some time with it this week. And if you didn't get one, let me know. I'll make sure to send one out to you this week. And those who created this guide, including the Reverend Stephanie Spellers, who some of you know well, wisely invite us to see that the starting point for this work is not learning to love others, interestingly, but learning to claim our own belovedness. If I am separated from the truth of God's love for me, if I'm carrying anger and judgment towards myself within, it's more likely that I will project that anger and judgment outward onto other people. This work is hard, of course, this work of really believing in our belovedness. It's a lifetime's work. Most of us will be about it for most of our lives, and we will need one another's companionship. We will need one another's voices saying, "You are beloved. I see the face of Christ in you." And that is why God has given us to one another. Send a letter to somebody that you knew 20 years ago and thank them for something. Or turn to the person next to you, or the person who lives next door to you, or sleeps next door to you, and thank them for being who they are. Remember that your belovedness is most fully manifest not in the times that are easy and the relationships that are perfect, but in the times of struggle, in the times of suffering and uncertainty. When you're simply present, simply reminding someone that you see them, that you care. You are the face of Christ. You are beloved, and in you, God is well pleased. Amen.